I've had good slots today, haven't I? Straight after lunch, right at the end of the day. So paid social. I'm going to try and be pretty succinct and talk about just one topic. We could talk a lot. There are a lot of topics in paid social that we could talk about. I'm going to be super narrow and talk about diversification. And it's diversification in a slightly different way. I'm going to talk specifically about Reddit as a platform. So Reddit's been having a good time of things recently. It's growing significantly. So let's deep dive into why. I was going to ask you all to close your eyes, but I might not do that now, considering it's getting dark outside. But I asked Reddit to picture that stereotypical Reddit user. Could you ever think of what do you think that person looks like? It's this guy. It's not too far away, really, is it? There's so much to unpick in this image. I don't know where to start, but my favourite bit is probably the pizza on the cat. Doesn't really make sense. Cowboy hat, neck beard, which is a term I've never heard before. But in a ways, this stereotype is right. It's a male-centric, gamer-focused platform, but that has started to change. So you might have seen in the news in December, and it got a lot of publicity in The Guardian a couple of weeks back. Reddit is growing a lot as a platform. It's now reaching 60% of adults in the UK. And the big stat is that it's overtaken TikTok with that reach metric. So it's had growth for the last 2 years, and the growth is the biggest out of any paid social platform. The other interesting stat on this is the daily average time spent. So you can see it's only 4 minutes. And this is from Ofcom data. If you read elsewhere, it is actually a bit higher than this, but I think this is being influenced by the where that traffic is coming from. Going back to that demographic, and then again, it's being referenced in Ipsos data, is how that demographic is changing. So there's a lot on here. Here's Reddit. You might be surprised to see that the demographic in terms of gender, so the green and the blue, is fairly balanced, pretty much 50-50 between male and female. And then in terms of age range, it's still got a younger demographic than something like Facebook or Instagram, but it's quite comparable to TikTok, which is this data on next to Reddit. So a fairly similar demographic to TikTok. If you can compare it to the other social platforms that we use, which is Pinterest. Pinterest is definitely a niche platform, very female-centric. It's got an affluent audience. It's slightly older. And Snapchat, we don't run a huge amount of Snapchat, but you can see by that demographic data at the bottom, it's got a very, very young demographic, with 66% of the audience in the 18 to 34 age range. An interesting, out of this Guardian piece last week, is that 1 in 3 Gen Z women are on the platform, which I wasn't expecting to hear. And it's specifically in certain subreddits, so skincare, pregnancy, parenting, they're all doubling in size and outstripping some of the bigger communities on the platform. A really interesting thing with Reddit, and I would say in paid social strategy in general, is how incremental is your audience. James, you said earlier that we were in a relatively new industry, and a lot of these platforms are relatively new. They're still establishing their core demographic, and I think what we're going to see from a diversification standpoint is that different people have different preferences. We all have them already. We're probably not going to use all of these social platforms, but we're going to pick and choose the ones that are most relevant to us. That has happened, and I think that's going to continue to be the trend. But at the moment, and this is from 2025 data, I would expect that Reddit's crossover with other platforms will start to grow. So in this data, only 30% of Reddit users are using Facebook. If we compare it to a different type of social media platform, 74% of users don't have LinkedIn. So what has changed? Well, there's a couple bits. They're definitely closely tied. You've probably seen it yourself on when you're searching. We've spoken about it a lot today, the impact of Gemini within search results. Reddit has an AI training deal with both Google and OpenAI. The other part of this is that organic rankings have changed quite a lot. So you can see on the right-hand side, this is a visibility index of Reddit on Google search results, and you can see how that spiked massively. And it is kind of, although Google haven't, is Adam in the room? He's gone, hasn't he? These things happened at the same time, and Google say they haven't influenced the organic ranking, but read into it, they probably are closely related. So if we take a step back from just paid social, that rise of Reddit has implications on digital in general. I think something that brands really need to consider in terms of LLM ranking is community management on Reddit. You've started to see quite a lot of maybe spammy recommendations on Reddit from brands. It doesn't feel right. Has anyone got a standing desk? Did it take a long time to research it? Took me bloody ages. Like there's so many options out there. The brand that I went with were FlexiSpot. They have their own dedicated Reddit channel. They also have a community manager on there answering a lot of questions. And I think that kind of community management is going to become incredibly effective if you're in a specialist industry, maybe something like broadband. Genie, I think that would work really well, because if you go on to ChatGPT, ask for standing desk recommendations, FlexiSpot are all over the place. Not all over the place, they're everywhere. At the time, I thought, it's probably advertising. Are these real recommendations? But when things are changing so dramatically, and there's so much spam on Reddit from brands, that probably the recommendations probably aren't great. When you see a brand doing something as proactive as this, it really changes the game. So we can't talk about diversification without talking about TikTok. I'm not going to talk about TikTok too much today, because I would now consider that TikTok is an established paid social channel. I spoke for years about diversification and paid social. TikTok was always number one. What we saw last year was that TikTok is now established as a full funnel platform in paid social. Our own digital spend on TikTok grew 175% last year, huge numbers, compared to just 5% on Meta. So brands need to be on TikTok. But do they need to be anywhere else? So using phosphor analysis, so we've only just started Reddit, really. Reddit advertising, it is quite new. But what we're seeing is looking at attribution partners. Sorry, it's not triple whale. It is phosphor. We're seeing for similar campaign types, sale optimized campaign types at a similar budget, it's driving a ROAS. So certainly very encouraging, because it's such a new platform. These platforms take a while to develop. They're only going to get better at developing their ability to drive sales. A couple of years back, this would have been very, very different. Like I said, we've talked about diversification for a long time. This is the decision-making process for diversification and what we would use when we're talking to our clients about going into new platforms. You can see the little logos at the top. This used to be Meta, Pinterest, TikTok, but Meta's obviously established. TikTok, I think is there, especially because it's only going to grow in its e-commerce capabilities. I saw a really interesting stat the other day that TikTok is the highest grossing revenue app in the world, which really surprised me. The other thing about TikTok is that although TikTok Shop, we've had people had mixed results with it, but like AI, it's only going to improve. And what we're seeing is a rise in the AOV of TikTok Shop. More brands are going to use it. And if we think 5 years' time, people are on TikTok now, they're going to want to check out on TikTok. So TikTok's established. So let's look at these other platforms. And going back to what I said about that incremental reach, these three platforms definitely provide that. So Pinterest, let's look at that first one. Customer and community. We spoke about that affluent, female-centric audience on Pinterest. Definitely leans into home and garden. Reddit, on the other hand, it's still very tech-focused, and I think it needs to be in quite specialist industries, but it does provide quite an interesting opportunity. And then Snapchat, I think for most clients, if you haven't got that young demographic right now, it's a bit of a no-go. But things might change. All of these platforms are, I would say, leaning towards upper funnel rather than being lower funnel. Pinterest is definitely the most established from a lower funnel perspective, but it's the most established as a platform as well. Industry fit, we've spoken about that already. And then creative. Creative is always, I've spoken about it already today, haven't I? It's always the big thing on paid social. Pinterest is definitely the easiest channel to export your meta ads to. Really, you're looking for simplicity across your ads. Big, bolder, simplistic static ads and videos that really clearly get across your message. Snapchat's all about UGC. Reddit's a little bit debatable, which I'll talk about in a sec. Content on Reddit. It can go two ways. For quite a long time, I always felt on Reddit, you really have to lean in hard to what the platform is all about. But if you've ever seen a Reddit ad with the comments left on, it's not nice, is it? I think this video actually has kind of what you'd expect. I think you can go super hard on Reddit. You can go all in like a big established brand like Oatly does. Or I think the better approach, especially if you have an attribution tool, is to really test the waters. Don't go all in. Just test your content that you're using on other platforms. It doesn't need to stand out. It doesn't necessarily need to be significantly different. I think it needs tweaks in terms of blending into the feed a little bit using Reddit language. But for me, and a recommendation for clients would be test Reddit with an attribution tool with some simplistic ads, tweak it based upon that audience's needs, and test the waters really if it's suited for your industry. And that's me. If you want to talk about creative, as I said earlier, come chat to me. Paid social management and of course diversification. Second time today, my LinkedIn has been up there. You've got another opportunity if you want to. And that is me.